Gettysburg Museum of History Studios. You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this special, no, it's not a special episode. It's a regular old Ask a Gettysburg guide. And today we are talking about the cyclorama. And our guest is Chris Brenneman. He's a licensed battlefield guide and author of the book, The Gettysburg Cyclorama. And this is his first time on the show. So welcome, Chris.
Welcome. Pleasure to be here.
And it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I grew up in York, Pennsylvania, and I've been coming here since I was a little kid. My grandma used to bring me for picnics and stuff, and I would climb on the cannons and the rocks, and I really always loved history, but I figured I'd been to Gettysburg so many times, I should go to other battlefields.
Yeah.
So I started touring all the other battlefields, but I didn't know about the licensed guides until after I got out of college. And when I found out about the guide force, I thought that would be a really great job.
What'd you go to college for?
Psychology.
Oh, interesting.
And for 12 years, I ran a bowling lanes.
Which makes sense.
Well, it's my family's business.
Oh, okay. So it was go to college, get a degree, in case you didn't want to take over the family business, or?
Perhaps, yeah. I guess maybe the family business was the easiest thing to do. It was always there, and I liked doing it, but I didn't necessarily love doing it.
Okay.
And when I heard about the guides, I said, that's something that I would love to do.
Sure.
And I don't make as much money as I used to, but I'm much happier getting out of bed in the morning.
Isn't that funny how you could make less money than you once did, but actually be glad to be alive?
Yeah.
Like, there's a difference, right?
What good's money do if you're all stressed out all the time?
Amen to that. Amen to that. Okay. Well, so, people get very upset if we don't get right to the subject on these episodes. So, in order to please them, we're going to start talking about the cyclorama. So, first of all, just give me some of the basics of the cyclorama. What is a cyclorama? No one today has heard of a cyclorama unless they're history nerds.
Right. Really what it is, it's the movie theater or the IMAX movie theater of the old days. Before movies, this was the first form of mass entertainment, that anybody with a quarter could go and see art. Before the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, people didn't have disposable income. And for the first time in that period, people had some extra money to spend on entertainment. And that's when professional baseball started, roller rinks, amusement parks, and cycloramas. So they were the first kind of movies of their day. Unfortunately, because they needed such a big building to hold these giant paintings, once motion pictures came around, they were much more affordable and easier to display. And people wanted to see stuff that moved. Cycloramas got kind of forgotten about.
Yeah.
So they're a lost form of entertainment. I like to tell people they're sort of like the 8-track tape of their day. There used to be a whole bunch of them, but there's not that many left anymore.
Right.
But there were these giant paintings. The Gettysburg Cyclorama is 42 feet tall, 377 feet in circumference.
Yeah.
So
big.
it's longer than a football field. If you stretch it out, it's as tall as a 4-story building. And you're on a raised platform about 15 feet high. And there's real terrain, rocks, logs, battlefield gear that's been dropped on the ground that leads down to the edge of the painting. It's hard to tell where the real objects end and the painted stuff starts. It gives you a 3D illusion when you're in it. It's almost like a 3D movie, a 3D IMAX. So it's really cool. Unfortunately, it gotten really beat up over the years.
Hold on, Chris. I'm sorry. We have to start over. I didn't hit record. Such an idiot. I miss having a producer. Okay. Let's try this again. See, this is what you guys are first lieutenants for. This is why you pay for the big bucks, is so you can see me screw everything up. So we got to start from the beginning. When I did that intro, was that too loud in your ears?
That's all right.
Okay. Because that was loud in mine. So let me just try something here. This is something I did not do before, I'm pretty sure. No, I did turn it down. Okay. Well, here we go. Try it again. One more time, ladies and gents. One more time. Let me make my mark on the recording. Nope, that's not it. And here we go.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios, you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
gentlemen, and welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg's Ask a Gettysburg Guide. And today we are talking about the cyclorama. And for those of you who may not know what a cyclorama is, stick around because you're going to learn. Our guest today is a licensed battlefield guide and co-author of the book, The Gettysburg Cyclorama, and his name is Chris Brenneman. And if you go to the Gettysburg Visitor Center today, you could participate in an evening with the painting with Chris. How often do you do that?
We do it once a month. Some of the busier months, we do it twice in a month.
Okay, once a month or twice a month. Chris Brenneman is our guest. Hello, Chris. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. It's like deja vu all over again.
Right on.
For those of you who don't understand that, we had to redo the beginning because I forgot to hit record earlier. Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Chris Brenneman, and I grew up in York, Pennsylvania, about an hour from here to the east. And I've been coming to Gettysburg since I was a little kid. And I used to climb on the rocks and climb on the cannons. And I just thought it was a really neat place to be. And I knew the blue guys were on this side and the gray guys were on that side, but I didn't know all the details. But I've always been a big history buff. And as I got older, the more and more I read about history, I just kept reading about Gettysburg. And, I'm reading about Devil's Den, and I could see the terrain because I knew it so well.
Yeah.
And it really helped as I was reading about Gettysburg that I knew the land as well as I did.
It helps to be able to picture it.
And it just kept bringing me back. There's so many great stories here.
Yeah.
It just kept bringing me back. For many years after college, I ran my family's bowling lanes. And I liked doing that, but I didn't love doing that. I didn't know about the guide force until about 15, 20 years ago. And when I found out about it, I said, that would be something I would love to do. So I quit my old job and started studying to become a guide. And while I was studying, the new visitor center opened. And so I got a job there. I figured the more I'm around history, it's going to help me pass my guide exam. I liked doing it so much that when I finally did become a guide, I also continued to work at the foundation. And the biggest thing that I love about the foundation is working with the cyclorama.
So some people may not understand what the foundation is, because they go to the visitor center, they assume it's federal property and it's the federal government that runs it. But that's not the case here. Tell us a little bit about the foundation.
Well, the foundation's a partner of the National Park Service. So they work together. And the problem was that the Park Service didn't have the budget to build a new visitor center and restore the cyclorama. It was in really bad shape in the old building. It took a 5-year project to totally restore the cyclorama. They built a whole new visitor center and moved everything into the new visitor center. So I work for the nonprofit group that's a partner with the park that runs the building in conjunction with the park. So the rangers are still at the building. They still do all their ranger programs and walks and talks through there. The rangers still own all the artifacts and everything. And after 20 years, then the foundation will give everything to the Park Service. Mm-hmm. So that'll be somewhere around 2028, unless they sign some other agreement to allow the foundation to keep running the building, which they probably will, because it's a lot easier to have a nonprofit group run a building than to have the government run it.
Right.
Because then everyone would have to be a government employee and it would cost a lot more.
Right. And this is a huge building that we have here. I mean, just the electric bill on that thing alone must be a fortune.
Oh gosh, I don't know how much it is, but you're right.
Yeah, it's got to be, right?
Huge.
Just looking at this side, to heat that place has got to be.
Yeah, and then when it's really hot, to air condition it, I bet is huge.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's move on now to the cyclorama itself. I'm sure a lot of I was going to say a lot of Americans, but really probably anybody around the world listening to this right now might not know what a cyclorama is. Mm-hmm. So let's start with the basics. What is a cyclorama painting?
Well, it's a giant round painting. The Gettysburg Cyclorama is 42 feet tall, 377 feet in circumference. You figure it's as tall as a 4-story building, and it's longer than a football field if you stretched it out. But it's more than just a big painting. Because of the way it's displayed and the format that it's in, it almost has a 3D illusion to it, that it makes you feel almost like it's real and you're outside in the middle of the battle. You're on a raised viewing platform about 15 foot high in the middle of the painting. And then there's real objects that lead down from the viewing platform to the edge of the painting to the point where it's hard to tell where the real stuff ended and the painted stuff starts.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's 3D.
Yeah.
And it was really beat up at the old building. Some of those elements had been lost. It wasn't nearly as amazing as it is today until they totally restored it and put everything back to the way the artist initially meant it to be.
So in the old days, and it's in its original day, would I have gone to see the cyclorama and it would have had this diorama, basically the set in front of it with all of the, with the cannons and the bushes and all that stuff? Or is that something that we added when we restored it?
No, that was always supposed to have been there.
Okay.
And it was there back in the 1880s, 1890s, but at some point it had gotten lost over the years.
Okay.
Also, 14 feet of sky had been cut off the top of the painting.
Right.
What the cycloramas were, really, they were the movie theaters before movies. For a quarter, you could be transported to a faraway battlefield or a foreign land. And it was so realistic, it made you feel like you were really there.
Yeah.
So they were the first form of mass entertainment. And it goes in with the whole evolution of society in the 1880s, 1890s. People started to have disposable income, and they could afford a little bit of money for entertainment. And cycloramas started then, roller rinks, amusement parks, professional baseball. It's all because people had disposable income for the first time. Unfortunately, when real motion pictures got invented, everybody wanted to see stuff that moved, and most of the cycloramas got neglected, and they're not around anymore. I like to tell people they're like the 8-track tape of their day.
Right.
There used to be a whole bunch, not so many left anymore.
You know what it reminds me of is when, you used to have to get you still do really, but people used to get a wedding photographer for their wedding. And then the cell phone comes along and takes really good pictures, and you can put filters on it, and you can think that you could take just as good a picture as a photographer can. And then it kind of just... That hurt wedding photography. Okay, so it's not the same. Forget it. I'm thinking it through. In my head, it made sense, but once I said it, it made no sense at all. So go ahead. I'm sorry. The 8-track was better.
Well, it's just the evolution of entertainment, but really, it's got some of the same things that we have today.
Yeah.
It's like the IMAX. It's so big, it makes you feel like you're in it.
Yeah.
It's like a 3D movie because the real stuff that jumps out at you is like the stuff that jumps out at you in a 3D movie. It's just a old days version of the same illusion.
But there's more to it than just putting a set in front of it that makes you think you're going into the painting. The painting is hung a certain way.
That's true. How
does that work?
It's a huge round painting, and it hangs from a ring at the top and hangs down, and there's another ring around the bottom, and there's metal weights hanging from that bottom ring. The weight pulling down on it makes it tighten in the middle just a little bit.
So it's kind of...
So the center is like 1.5 feet closer to you than the top and the bottom.
There you go.
So it's almost like you're in a very slight hourglass shape.
Now, would they have painted it that way, or would they have painted it flat?
They painted it like that.
Okay.
The canvas naturally does that because of the ring on the top and bottom hold the top and the bottom tight.
Right.
But because it's a woven thing and you're stretching it, it just naturally tightens in the middle. So if it's hung like that when it's painted, it has to be hung like that
to be seen.
It's not going to look right if you don't hang it like that in the future.
But we didn't hang it that way in the old cyclorama building, right?
Yes. What happened was after about 1895, 1900, motion pictures started to come out, and everyone wanted to see pictures that move. So they stopped going to see the cycloramas, and they couldn't afford to have them in big, dedicated buildings that were made just for holding these massive paintings. So what they did was they lost the real stuff that leads down to it, and they cut some of the sky off the top so it would fit in a big circus tent. And they traveled around at like state fairs and stuff and showed it in these big tents. Well, the sky is really important too, because there's a canopy over your head that keeps you from seeing where the sky ends. When you cut the sky off and you can see where it ends, it just ruins the whole illusion.
Right.
So it didn't have the real stuff leading down to it. It didn't have the extra sky. You could see the top and bottom of the painting, and it was just going straight up and down.
What I like about it today is we've been able to restore the way it was originally supposed to be seen, right? Including with the diorama. But we've added the 21st century to it. We've got music and sound effects and narration and light. The light is really cool and imaginative. I loved in the beginning, the sun is rising in the east. If you look in the eastern sky and you can see the sun rising and then the whole place gets brighter and everything. I just think that's a really cool touch. That obviously wasn't something that they did back then with the light, right?
Correct. Yeah. In the old days, they would have had skylights and gas lights. And they would have just had it in a daylight sort of lighting situation.
Yeah.
It wasn't until later that they started adding in more and more things. Originally, they would have these guys called delineators that would stand around, and they would be many times actual veterans of the Civil War or the Battle of Gettysburg, and they would stand around in a uniform and tell people stories, which would have been really cool. But unfortunately, nobody wrote down the stories these guys used to tell. Because I bet you there were some really good ones.
Oh, sure.
And we've been able to find a couple pretty famous guys that were delineators.
Like who?
Well, there was a guy named Charles Hale from the 5th New Hampshire, and he was the assistant to General Cross. And that's how we know about Cross having his premonition that he was going to get killed in the wheat field. He had given some of his personal belongings to Hale.
Okay.
And so he could have told that story in the cyclorama.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Another gentleman that we talk about in our evening program, the Evening with the Painting, we do once or twice a month at the Visitor Center. There was a gentleman that, and his name is just escaping me for 1 second. I'll think of it in a moment. But he was on Stevens Knoll in between Culp's Hill and East Cemetery Hill on day 2. A cannonball exploded almost in his face, and he was knocked to the ground. He was hit by 48 pieces of shrapnel.
Jeez.
They just figured the guy was dead. 2 days later, on the 4th, there was a wagon picking up bodies for burial. They picked this guy up, threw him on the wagon. He woke up and says, "Did we win?"
Oh,
Here, the guy wasn't dead yet.
Yeah.
He survived. He ended up becoming one of these cyclorama delineators. When they were traveling around in a big circus tent,
Did he keep all his limbs?
he lost an arm and an eye.
Oh. Okay.
He's in the book, and his name is just escaping me, but it'll come to my head in just a second.
I bet
I'm not thinking of it.
you Mike Lentz knows that in the comments section. We'll get it.
But yeah, I'll have it in one moment. But all I can figure is that the hot pieces of shrapnel that hit him must have cauterized his own wounds, and he didn't bleed out.
Okay.
But yeah, just the fact that this guy survived is amazing. But then he traveled around with the cyclorama. He actually owned the New York copy of it. I forgot to tell you, Philippot, the French artist that painted it, Paul Philippot, he did 4 cycloramas. He did one that was originally shown in Chicago. One was shown in Boston, and that's the one that has survived all these years and that we have today.
So we have the Boston version.
Correct. And it was the second one. And then he did a third one for Philadelphia and a 4th one for New York City. And the gentleman I was just talking about owned the New York copy for a while and was traveling around in a circus tent showing it to people. He was in Tampa Bay, Florida, and he was showing it to soldiers that were going off to the Mexican-American War. Excuse me, the Spanish-American War. It was in such bad shape, it was literally falling apart. He cut it into pieces and gave some of the pieces to veterans posts.
Huh.
And there's 2 pieces in the Parks collection and one that's privately owned. So there's still 3 pieces of the New York one that has survived.
So you say, Philippot, the artist, did 4. To someone in the audience who's new to all this story, they may be thinking, how much time did this guy have to do? I mean, the dimensions that you give in the beginning make this thing huge. I mean, how did he paint all that? He didn't paint it all by himself.
Right. Good question. I kind of skipped ahead there. Well, just to give you the timeline and everything, an American businessman saw one of Philippot's paintings in Europe.
Okay.
He was a European artist.
Was it a cyclorama or just a regular painting? Okay.
It was a cyclorama of the Siege of Paris.
Okay.
From the Franco-Prussian War, probably. But he sees one of these guys' paintings and he says, "This guy is great. I'm going to bring this over to the United States and we're going to get rich." This is a money-making. It's like the producer and director of a movie.
Sure.
And if you want to produce a great movie, you want to get Steven Spielberg or somebody like that to be your director.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what Philippot was of his day. So he comes over to the United States. He does 6 months of research. They come to Gettysburg. They take terrain photos. They tour the battlefield with a guide. They built a 15-foot high platform and took pictures in each direction to keep the land really accurate in the painting. He talks to at least 3 generals plus normal soldiers, does a lot of research, and that's what he uses to paint the painting. But then it takes about a year to paint the painting. The main artist has a dozen guys helping it, and he lays everything out. But some guys only painted horses. Some guys only painted people. Some guys only painted,
specialized
terrain. So they were all really good at their different jobs.
Yeah, okay.
And he's got a big round studio with a raised platform in the middle. So Philibert can stand back and supervise everybody and make sure everything looks good from where the viewer is going to be seeing it.
Yeah.
So it takes about a year to paint. The first one opened in Chicago. It was such a big hit. They tell him to paint 3 more. And each copy took about a year. So a dozen guys working for a whole year to do each copy.
Yeah. But that's still, it doesn't sound like a lot of people considering the scope of this thing and the detail in it.
Yeah, but then on the other hand, it's like one guy working for 12 years straight.
Yeah.
It's a lot of man hours. And I bet you they were doing like 50-hour weeks too. They weren't necessarily working short weeks.
It wasn't an 8-hour day.
Yeah, they probably wanted to crank this thing out and make money.
Right.
The faster they can get them out, the more money they can make.
Yeah. So he's got this team of people. It takes them a year to do one, right? What was the first one they did?
For Chicago.
For Chicago. Now, is it true that for each city, he would paint a different regiment in a certain spot? That was a regiment from that state, at least, if not that city?
Well, he didn't necessarily paint them any different, but they had this thing called a key that you would get in your program.
That's right.
And it was like a round drawing with little numbers on it. And you would say, like, number 2 is General Meade, and number 30 is the such and such Pennsylvania. What they would do is they would change the key in different cities and mention more guys from the local area.
Right.
So they were doing a little local marketing.
So yeah. So in the interest of making a local buck, you're actually not getting accurate history because it could be a regiment that wasn't even near there.
Well, you at least got somebody that was near there,
or at least at the battle.
Well, I mean, even within like 100 yards.
Okay.
Yeah, he wasn't.
So it wouldn't have been
far up.
Wouldn't have been someone that's like sitting down on the south end of the field or over on Culp's Hill or something. It was somebody that would have been in the vicinity of the center of the Union line.
Yeah.
But maybe not right at the angle.
Maybe moves him 100 yards so you can see him better in his logic.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I gotcha.
You also have to take into account that in the real world, you're up on this platform viewing the painting.
Right.
And you're kind of raised in an artificial position, 15 feet up.
Right.
In real life, there would be someone underneath you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There would be troops charging underneath the painting. So he has to warp those troops off to the side a little bit so you can see them.
Well, now, so you bring up the platform. He took these pictures, I think you said this before, from a platform that's about 15 feet high, right? Mm-hmm. And then would transpose somehow those photographs onto the canvas. I was saying to you beforehand, we were just talking about it, I paint. I would love to be able to paint something this huge. But I don't have the wherewithal to do the math. Like the minute somebody would say, I'd be like, I want to paint a 360 degree painting that's, 300 something feet long and 40 feet high and whatever. People are like, great. So what you're going to need is a 15-foot platform. You're going to have photographs to shoot in every direction. And then you're going to have to come back and then transpose it over. And you're going to have to, because they does a small version first, right?
Correct.
And then he's got to blow it up, and this is all without computers, all without electric light, I'm assuming, right? I mean, in other words, like now I can take a projector, I could take a photograph, and I could put it on put a magnifier on it that projects it onto my canvas, and I can trace it, and then I just paint it in. So I can have a photograph perfect painting.
Well, they did a little bit of that, actually.
So how would they have done that?
Well, he takes his pictures from that raised platform, and by the way, he has some of his staff or a guy with a horse standing at different distances.
Yeah, I like that.
In the painting to keep the scale of the guys right as they get farther and farther away. Because, they had that perspective thing where you have to figure out how the size gets smaller and smaller. So I'm sure that was very helpful. Then they had a 1/10 size mold of the paint, sort of the painting. So you figure it's 4 feet high and about 37 feet around, and it's got that inward curve built into it. And they put a canvas on that, and they do it with charcoal. And it's Philip Bateau and probably maybe one or two of his main landscape guys, the guys whose landscape is their specialty. They do it in charcoal because you can change the charcoal and erase it.
Sure.
Once they're happy with the charcoal version, they ink it. Then they put tracing paper over top of the whole thing. They trace it and they draw grid lines on the tracing paper. Then they take photographs of the tracing paper. And back in those days, they had the glass plate negative.
Oh.
They could shine a bright light through that glass plate negative.
Of course.
And it would project it up there.
Okay.
And they would draw grids 10 times bigger up on the blank canvas. But when the grids match, you make it exactly 10 times bigger. And it was like an overhead projector.
So,
almost.
okay, so they did have
and they
that.
could sketch it in. Then he takes the small version and he paints over it with oil paint. And that becomes the color wheel to keep the colors consistent while you're doing the big one.
Okay.
So it is almost like a paint by numbers, more complicated than that,
Sure.
but kind of. Once it's all gridded out and sketched in, then the guys that are specialized in horses can start on horses. The guys that are good at trees can start on trees, and everybody can work almost simultaneously. And they have big towers on wheels, and there's like a railroad track running around the base of the painting, so they can move these towers, and guys can be painting at several different places at different heights. Philip Bateau can be standing on the raised platform in the middle, bossing everybody around and making sure it looks the way he wants it to look.
Wow. I mean, they really sat and figured this out. This wasn't like a whimsical type of thing. You actually figured out the science of doing a 360-degree painting back in those days. So of course you would. Of course you would. Yeah. So, okay, so they get it done. How long, do you know how long it would have taken to dry? I mean, I guess it would be drying in sections.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
Did they make their own paints?
That's a good question, too. I know the paints that they used back then were many times very toxic.
Yeah, poisonous.
And so when they went to figure out how to match the colors today, it was tricky because some of the colors were made with arsenic and cadmium and stuff like that was in there.
Zinc and lead.
Yeah. So they had to make the new colors match the old colors, and that was kind of tricky. I know they painted all the sky first because they wanted to get that all on there so it dried kind of like at the same time.
Okay.
To keep the sky especially consistent.
Got it.
I would imagine the whole rest of the painting, there's so much going on, it wouldn't maybe be noticeable.
Right.
But if the sky dried and one side was a little lighter than the other side, you might be able to tell.
Now, we were talking also beforehand about the canvas. I seem to remember, and I feel like it was at an evening with the painting, where I got the impression that the canvas was actually more like a carpet backing, the stuff that you would actually make, weave carpets into. But you said, no, it's regular canvas. It's just a heavier weave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, now that I think about it, there is a new backing that has been put on the back of the canvas to give it more strength.
Right.
So that newer stuff that's on the back that reinforcing it maybe is more like what you're describing.
Maybe that's what I was confusing.
Yeah. So it is technically 2 layers thick now.
Okay.
What you're seeing when you're on the inside of it, but then it's got a protective, reinforcing background on the back of it.
What's fascinating, ladies and gentlemen, if you ever get a chance to go to an evening with a painting, I suggest you do it. I highly recommend this. It is, I remember when they built the visitor center, I didn't go and look at the cyclorama. I was like, let's see a painting, right? And this is from a guy who painted, and it wasn't until I moved back here in 2018 that I went to see it, and I was like, oh my God! Like, what an a-hole I am for what an asshole I am for not seeing this earlier. This is amazing. And then I went to, a couple of years after that, I went to an evening with the painting. It was Sue Boardman who did it. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't believe that, we were allowed to go behind the down on the floor under the diorama, crawl back behind the painting, and you can see the curvature of it from down there. And you really have to do this, ladies and gentlemen. It is really one of the coolest things that you can do. So one of the things I love about it is, I love when I see a painting, I get right up to it and I'm like, what are they doing? Like, what are the brush strokes that they're doing to make it look so real? Because I'm not doing that, right? And so I want to learn. And of course, I never remember by the time I get home. But when you go up to, say, one of the guys who's laying wounded on the ground, and you look at his face, it's like 4 brush strokes at the most, and not very detailed. But from up on the platform, you see an entire face. Mm-hmm. Go into that a little bit.
It's almost like impressionism.
Yeah.
Where when you're up close, it looks all blurry, and you go back and it becomes something. I don't know what kind of skill, though, those artists had to learn to be able to know that if I paint this here, what it's going to look like back there.
Yeah.
That is just so cool that they could do that.
Yeah.
One artist told me they would paint with big, long brushes.
Yep.
That were like 4 feet long.
The handle was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that they were actually back a little ways as they were painting it. And I think that's another reason why Philip Pateau was up on the platform behind them, so he could verify that looked really good.
Yeah, what you're doing is working.
But what it is your brain fills in the missing details.
Yeah.
And if you see most of what looks like a person, you see a face, it looks kind of blurry, but it's going to look blurry if it's 30 feet away from you.
Yeah.
So you fill in the rest of the details, and you don't need all the details, basically.
By the way, the veteran you're talking about was John F. Chase from the 5th Maine Battery.
Right,
under
John Chase.
Stevens. Yeah, Stevens Battery. Okay, so now you have the little dabble do ya theory there with certain things. Not everything is that way. There are certain things that are more detailed because they want it to be more detailed, or it's bigger and it needs to be more detailed, like a house, for example, or something. Like,
right.
The houses, they're not as abstract as these people's faces.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. And things that are really far away that he wouldn't necessarily have to have any detail. Sometimes he does put detail. For example, I have a picture of General Lee and his staff.
All right, so
and he
this
is really far away. In the painting, it's just like a little group of guys off in the distance.
Just hanging out.
But if you zoom in with a really powerful binoculars or a really good camera, you can see that Lee is definitely one of those figures. He's on his horse Traveler. He's looking back at us with binoculars. You can see he's wearing white gloves.
So you can see, what I'm going to do is people don't need to see us here, so I'm going to make this fit the whole screen, as best it can. So that's the aspect ratio of the picture there. But look, so there it is. There's Lee and his staff. And there, I would imagine, would you say where the Virginia Monument is, like roughly in that area?
Just a little bit north of where the Virginia Monument is in the painting.
And, if you look at it closely, it's not very, you're saying it's detailed, but it's not. It's like, you know what I mean? Like it's a detail that no one would really notice unless you really went looking for it. But the detail of the figures is very abstract. It's really just a clump of paint in certain shapes.
Right. But it's enough that if you were focusing in with binoculars, it would still seem like something.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
And you can definitely tell which one is Lee.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's on the white horse right in the middle there.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, that's pretty neat.
I think that's pretty cool. So even if you had binoculars, it still looked good.
Yeah. That is pretty cool. So, now that we're into pictures, let's talk about some of the details of the cyclorama here. Let me get rid of this one here for now. There's Lee. Okay. So what other ones do we have here? There's Lincoln. Everybody loves Lincoln, right? And Lincoln is supposedly in the painting. Now I say supposedly because Philip Pateau never said, "That is Abraham Lincoln." Right?
Well, it was never in any of the official keys that I was telling you about. But he visited Gettysburg in 1914, and they showed it to him. And supposedly he pointed out Lincoln to the people that worked at the building at the time.
Got it. Okay.
And that story has been repeated ever since 1914.
So
I think we have pretty good, let's say, verbal history of it that's accurate. And I mean, it really looks like Lincoln. I think too much to be a coincidence.
Well, let's get to that one there. What did I call it? Real Abe. There it is. Okay, so here's Lincoln. Now, Lincoln in this case here is being carried off. Is he supposed to be dead or wounded?
The story is that he put him in as a wounded soldier because he symbolizes a wounded nation.
Okay.
So that's what Philip Bateau said why he did it that way.
All right. That makes sense. Okay, so then, sorry, I hit the wrong thing. I guess I need better glasses. What are the other ones we've got here? Let's see. Oh, okay. Now, so Philip Bateau puts himself in. By the way, for those of you listening on the audio only version, these visuals are available for our first lieutenants over at patreon.com/addressing Gettysburg. So Philip Bateau, let me get rid of Lincoln here. Where'd he go? Real Abe. There he is. Man, I wish I had a producer with me right now. Okay. There he is. And which one is he?
He's the guy with the sword resting across his knee, leaning against the tree there.
There he is. Probably the coolest looking figure in the entire painting. Right? Like,
yeah.
Just calmly and coolly, just resting against a tree.
Well, and there's a picture of him pointing himself out in the painting. So there's a picture of the real him pointing at
right, yeah.
the version of himself. And what's kind of interesting is he's a little bit balder and a little bit more overweight in real life than he is in the painting. You know what I'm saying?
Please, I would. If I were to paint myself into a painting, I'd be all muscular and
yeah. It's at least going to be the younger, thinner Chris, at least, right?
Exactly. Of course. Who wouldn't? I mean, when you're a painter, Bob Ross always used to say this: "You're God. You can it's your world. You could do anything you want."
That's right.
All right. So then that was that's Philip Bateau there. Okay. Now what about now there are people in this who are not. Let me make sure I get this right. They were not in the battle, or they were not at Pickett's charge.
Well, in some cases, both.
Okay. So what's the case of the Byrd brothers?
The Byrd brothers were in the battle, but they were wounded on the first day.
Okay, so they weren't.
They're from Romulus, Michigan. They were in the 24th Michigan of the Iron Brigade. And you can see in the picture there, one guy got hit in the arm, one guy got hit in the leg, and they helped each other off the field.
Okay.
But they wouldn't have been in the middle of the high water mark during Pickett's charge 2 days later. However, when Philip Bateau was in Gettysburg doing research, they were in town doing a reunion. And he must have thought they were really nice guys, so he snuck them into the painting.
Okay.
But if you see, they have gray hair.
Yes.
So I'm thinking that's what they looked like when he met them, not necessarily what they looked like during the battle.
I wonder if that's his way. Yeah, it's his way of saying. And then also they're not facing the battle, right?
Right.
Now, aren't there other figures that are also not facing the battle besides these two?
It seems to me like any assistants that got snuck in, or people that were creatively inserted, they're not fighting.
Right.
They're looking at us, and they're not shown as combatants. And that was part of the tradition. When Philip Bateau snuck himself in there, he was saying that he helped create the painting. But if he had signed it, it'd be like taking credit for the whole thing by himself. So that was sort of their tradition. By sneaking themselves in there, they were saying that they helped do it. But they didn't want to show themselves as fighting, because that'd be like saying they were actually in the battle. There's another assistant standing there with his arm in a sling. And, look at the Byrd brothers. All the fighting is occurring 15 feet behind them.
Right. You can see the backs of the guys behind them.
They're awfully casual for guys that there's bullets flying 10 feet away. Yeah.
It looks like one of the guys is like, this George Meade, I'm not really sure about him.
Yeah.
Like he's kind of just like leaning in, and the other guy's like, can we just get away from the bullets first?
Right.
Yeah.
Who bandaged their wounds if they're only 10 feet from where the firing line is? You know what I mean?
That's a great question.
Right?
Yeah, I never thought of that one.
The same thing with the one artist who has his arm in a sling. He definitely looks way too casual.
Right.
Now, I think I found a couple other assistants in the hospital scene. One guy is giving water to a friend, but he's looking at us.
Looking at us. So you mentioned before that when they did the photographs, they had men on horseback or just a horse, at various distances from the camera to get perspective. When they went and painted, when they transferred it over, do you know, did they transfer over the models? I mean, I would think, like, for example, I'm going to go from my photograph to my charcoal drawing, right? I'm going to need perspective of a person on that plane for the rest of my drawing. So then do I put him in and then base my other figures off of him? Is he my whatever you call that? Or do I not put him in and then just start from scratch? I mean, I would imagine that they had to, right?
I would think a little bit of both. Because, like, one of the guys in the picture is standing almost at the same place Phil Bateau's self-portrait is.
Okay.
So he probably did intentionally use that guy from then on to keep the scale right. Of guys behind him.
Do we have the photographs?
Yeah, they're all in the book there.
So we could theoretically, like, take the photographs and go look at the cyclorama and see if there's a figure where the model is.
Right, and there is in a couple places.
In a couple places, okay.
Yeah.
So that we know that he did do that a few times.
Yeah.
But they're not necessarily in the same pose.
No. Now, I think he had models that stood around in different poses and uniform to make some of the scenes.
Right, okay.
And probably his assistants helped do that too, and that's why they got snuck in. Maybe.
Right. Okay, all right, very good. Now, what else? So the Bird Brothers, there they are. Now, everybody loves, it seems, dogs. We've got dogs on monuments. We've got the story of, was it Sadie? Sally? No,
Sally.
No, Sally's the one on the monument. What's the one on Culp's Hill? What the hell's the one that...
the one that runs back and forth between the lines.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the name of that dog was, but I just remember the quote that I can't.
It'll make me cry. It'll make me. I can't hear it. That's the story. I can never tell that story to anybody, and I can't hear it. It's the worst. You're getting me going. All right, go ahead. For the sake of the audience, go ahead. I'll mute my mic so they don't hear me sobbing.
Well, the dog ran back and forth between the Union and Confederate lines during the firing several times.
Yeah.
Apparently, its owner was a Confederate who got hit, and it stopped and it was licking its owner when it too got killed. But Union General Kane ordered them to give the dog a proper burial. He said that dog was the only Christian-minded soul on this field.
Yeah.
Which, the only thing trying to not kill somebody.
Right.
And
it's just going and licking the hands of
a poor
wounded
owner.
people. Yeah.
Yeah. And now Sally the dog, of course, is from the 11th Pennsylvania. And she supposedly barked at the enemy during battle.
Yeah.
And she was like their mascot. Well, they were up on Oak Ridge on day one, and they got forced back. They lost the dog in the confusion of the retreat, but they couldn't go back to Oak Ridge to look for it because that was Confederate territory for the rest of the battle. When the battle ends and the guys from the 11th Pennsylvania finally got out to Oak Ridge, Sally the dog was still there guarding the guys from their unit. So they got the dog back, and they have a little statue of her on their monument.
Yeah.
Now, in the painting, there's a small black dog howling over a dead or badly wounded Union guy. And it seems to be the same general shape and color and everything as Sally the dog. There was a rumor that was Phil Bateau's dog, but I've never been able to find anything to corroborate that. Unfortunately, if Phil Bateau had a diary, no one knows where it is or it has not survived. It would be a gold mine if I could find it, because then I could say for sure that, this guy that I'm pretty sure is an assistant that's snuck in over here, for example. What's his name, though? What's his backstory?
Yeah.
There's got to be a whole lot of neat things. When I talked to such and such a general, he told me this story. So I painted it in this area, I bet you there'd be a million of those. If that exists and it ever turns up, I'd be so happy.
Now, let's say for fellow doggy lovers out there in the audience that want to come to the cyclorama and see where this dog is. I've never seen this before. Where would I go and look?
In the area of Meade's headquarters,
Okay.
there's a well and a hospital scene.
Uh-huh.
And Lincoln that we just showed is just above the well. And then just to the left of that, there's these wounded guys and this dog. There's a big haystack nearby.
It's funny because I've always only focused on the well, and now you bring up the well. The well is a really cool element of the cyclorama because it is half paint, half practical.
Yes, it's really cool.
Explain that.
Well, it's a stone well, and the front half of it is made of real rocks. The back half of it's in the painting, and it's painted. There's a tripod that's holding up a rope that goes down into the well. Two of the legs of the tripod are in the painting. One of them is a real piece of wood that leans up. It looks like it touches the painting, but it just misses it by like 1 inch. Then there's ropes that go down into the well that are real.
Yeah.
They're painted to a certain point, then a real rope just hangs down.
Yeah.
And there's just a pin that goes to the painting that rope hangs from.
That's so cool.
At the old building, when they didn't have a diorama, they had sewn some sky onto the bottom of it and painted over it with some rocks and bushes to make it, not look quite so weird that it didn't have a diorama.
Right.
So they painted in the front half of a well, but it had a tripod that only had 2 legs, and the guy was holding a rope that didn't go anywhere. So there was no rope going down into the actual well. So it looked really weird.
Yeah.
But it looks so much better now. And people ask, where's the real stuff end? And that's a great place to show them because it literally cuts the well in half.
Yeah, that I was most impressed with when I first saw that. I thought that was a really neat detail there. All right, so what else did you get? Okay, now, but there are apparently, other sightings of Abraham Lincoln in the photograph. Now, we showed you the photograph before of Abraham Lincoln being carried away.
Mm-hmm.
And it's clearly Abraham Lincoln. I mean, the face is him. And but Philip Pateau also pointed him out. So we know that's Abe. But then there's other people that claim to see Abraham Lincoln. Now, this one is tough here. Let me see if I can...
Yeah, one of the questions that was submitted asked about another guy near Lincoln that was sort of similar. And I searched around the whole area, and this was the guy that I found that was closest, but I just don't think it's Lincoln. He's just not nearly as close to looking like Lincoln as that other guy did.
Yeah, I mean, to me, he just looks like mush. I was looking at it closer before on the monitor, and I tilted my head upside down, and I wonder if I could actually do that here for the audience, and we can see.
His hair is also kind of reddish.
Yeah, right. Reddish hair. Let's see. Flip. What do I want to do? I want to flip it. Rotate 180. There we go. Yeah. Now we're looking at him right side up, and he looks like actually looks like a friend of mine. It doesn't look like Abraham Lincoln. I know this guy. There. Look at that. No, this is a young man. This is not Abraham Lincoln. Sorry, whoever brought that to your attention, tell them we've debunked it. It's
All
not
right.
Abe.
Now, we don't want to answer everybody's question before we get to the question and answer thing. There's one other thing I wanted to talk about. The cyclorama that you see, it's kind of like the director's cut of the cyclorama. Oh. And something I discovered as I was doing my research for the book was that they actually opened it in Boston, showed it for a few years, closed it down for a little bit, kind of spruced it up, and then reopened it again.
Huh.
And they were listening to feedback that the audience was giving them on the platform in Boston. They were using that feedback to improve the Philadelphia and the New York copy.
Uh-huh.
And then when they finished the Philadelphia and New York one, they spruced up the Boston one.
Interesting.
And I was able to find areas where some more troops were added, more flags were added. General Meade was initially not in the painting, and they added him later.
Poor Meade.
And, well, what's really interesting is after it was in Boston for a while, they sent it to Philadelphia. And I think the biggest reason they sent it to Philadelphia was because Meade wasn't in it, and now he is.
Uh-huh. Okay.
How cheesed off must Philadelphia have been that their hometown guy commands the Northern Army, and then the painting comes out and he's not in it.
Yeah, right.
You know, that
right.
must have really stuck in their craw. And when they sent the updated version, I hope that made them feel a lot better to see Meade very visible again.
There are a lot of changes. There is a chapter called Notes on Changes to the Original Painting. And I'm looking at them here. There are a good deal of changes. But, you know, another thing is, and this is often pointed out in the Evening with the Painting, or at least the ones I've been to, the ghost. You know, all you ghost people, you want to see a ghost? It's in the cyclorama.
That's a good one. I'm glad you brought that up. What it is there's a line of troops in the background. They're like the provost guard. They're supposed to gather up prisoners or anybody that tries to run away. Well, there was a line of maybe 20-some guys. They penciled in 4 guys, but they forgot to paint them. Then when they painted over them, the pencil bleeds through the paint just a little bit.
Right.
And you can see the ghostly outline of where these 4 guys were supposed to be. And it's an Italian term called pentimenti, when the pencil bleeds through the paint a little bit. So you can see pentimenti around these missing ghostly figures in the painting.
Also, I think you can see Armistead's spirit leave his body, right? Isn't Armistead's...
They didn't paint him in exactly where they drew him in.
Right.
And so it's almost like you can see the outline of his body just behind his actual self. You're right. It almost looks like the recoil of him falling backwards.
Yeah. And so, did people, did you discover those from the restoration, or did we know about those ahead of time?
I discovered it just by comparing old photographs to newer photographs.
Okay.
And I was really excited. You know, talking about the Battle of Gettysburg, if you pick a subject about the Battle of Gettysburg, Pickett's Charge, let's just say.
Yeah.
Is there 50 books written about Pickett's Charge? 75 books? I mean, who knows?
Right.
You know, to actually be able to find something new that no one knew about.
Yeah.
I was really excited. There's not many topics that there's new things to discover about the Battle of Gettysburg. So the fact that they had changed it was really exciting for me.
You know what's interesting is I've become, in the last year or so, a little more interested in the history of tourism here in Gettysburg. And this is certainly part of that. I mean, this is the way this is the Morgan Freeman movie that we watch now, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the documentary and entertainment of its day.
Yeah. Except they don't have anybody with the great voice of Morgan Freeman. I mean, let's be honest. That's the best voice ever. But I digress. So it's just fascinating to me there because, you know, again, or not again, but we find that, you know, he has to make some changes, and therefore really frivolous reasons, you know, oh, well, this is going to be in this city, so let's, we're going to change the key. We're going to lie in the key just to make everybody feel good. Little things like that. But how many people saw that in the key and didn't know, which I'm going to assume is all of them, didn't know that that unit was not that unit. That was not there at the time of the battle. We just put that in there because they're from Illinois.
But he does it vague enough so that it's reasonable.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get you.
Like the 72nd Pennsylvania in Pennsylvania is the 19th Massachusetts and 42nd New York.
Uh-huh.
And one is charging in like this and one is charging in right next to him.
Okay.
So they're pretty close.
Yeah.
One of the keys, they do mention the 1st Minnesota in that area. So you moved them a couple hundred yards. Now they're north of the copse of trees instead of south of the copse of trees. Right. But they did charge into the high water mark at the very end of it. You know, maybe only a few of them, but they were some of the guys that were shifting that direction at the very end.
Right. Weren't there only 35 of them left, or 38 of them or something like that?
Well, they had 100 guys on detached duty that had returned after day 2.
That's right. I forgot.
But then they lost some of them in the bombardment and stuff. So I think they were back to about 140, and then they lose like 30 or 40 more of those guys.
I'm telling you, man.
So yeah,
First Minnesota.
those first Minnesota guys are.
I'm just gonna move that into your face there.
They're really in some bad places.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do this now. Again, once a month, sometimes twice a month, evening with the painting. It's after hours, right? Because you guys
Correct.
have to run the regular shows. So it's after 5 or 4. I always
In the
forget.
winter, we close at 4. In the summer, spring, fall, we close at 5. So we meet in the education room, and I do a PowerPoint about the history, the restoration, all the different versions of it. Then we take the people underneath the painting, and then we go up on the platform and point out all the people, places, and things in the picture. In a normal show, you see the sound and light program, which is neat that you talked about. It's really cool.
Yeah.
But you have about 5 minutes after the sound and light show to soak in the painting. It's just so big, and there's so many details.
And you don't know what you're looking at. There's nobody saying, if you look over here, there's this. It's just kind of explore on your own.
Yeah, there's not enough time.
This is not that. And so, like, if you've been here and you've been to the cyclorama during normal business hours, and you're like, what do I need to do this for? I've been to this cyclorama before. You're wrong.
Right.
You're wrong. This is not that. This is different. And you are going to fall in love with the cyclorama like I did. I mean, I suddenly became, enamored with this thing because of an evening with the painting. So I really, really suggest you do it.
Well, and me too. I was telling you, I had seen the painting many times as a kid. And I thought it was neat. It has a lot of action in it.
Sure.
But it didn't blow me away. When Sue started doing her talks about how they were going to restore the painting with the 3D elements, I thought to myself, well, that sounds pretty neat.
Yeah.
But when I walked in the visitor center and I started working there, they weren't quite done yet, but they were almost done. But the first time I went up there in the upstairs and I saw what it looks like the way it's displayed now,
Right.
where it's got the 3D feel to it, it just blew me away. And I've been hooked ever since. And Sue was the one that got me into it. And it's just my favorite thing now.
Yeah.
So
No, it's fascinating. Here, this is another one. This is Fake Abe, right? This is another Fake Abe?
maybe. I don't know. That could have been another
Oh,
guy.
no. I'm sorry. This is Dr. Studi.
Yeah, he was a local doctor that we think also may have met Philip Bateau and got snuck into the painting.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Sorry.
He was an
looking
older
through.
guy, so we think it's that guy there with the gray hair.
Yeah.
There is a chance Dr. Studi could also be the guy there's a lean-to, and it looks like he's about to start, maybe sawing off a limb. There's another guy that could also be Dr. Studi, but he was an older gentleman, so I think that might be him.
The guy right in the center there with his back to us,
Yes.
and the white hair. They're working on the kid's leg.
Yeah.
That's Dr. Studi. All right. Very good. Well, why don't we do this? We'll take a break and we'll hear from our patrons and see what questions they have for you about the Gettysburg Cyclorama. If you are watching and you haven't picked up a copy of this book yet, this is the cover here. It's nice. It's big. There's pictures. My favorite type of book. A lot of pictures and not a lot of words. No, there are a lot of words too, so that you understand what you're looking at with the pictures. But anyway, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back after these words.
Our favorite bookstore in Gettysburg is For the Historian, located at 42 York Street. It's because they have the best selection of Civil War books in Gettysburg, both new and used. And online, they have even more to choose from. And if the Civil War isn't your thing, that's not a problem. This is For the Historian, after all. They cover history from the ancient world to the 21st century with a strong selection of World War II and American Revolution books. And it's astounding how many thousands of titles from Osprey, Savas Beatty, UNC Press, and more they have in their store. And that's because, well, they have a warehouse too. And that's where they keep all the books that are available online at forthehistorian.com. And folks, if you go to forthehistorian.com now and order books until you're blue in the face, be sure you mention that you heard about them on Addressing Gettysburg in the Note to Seller box, and they will refund your shipping costs. And if you prefer to stop by when you're in town, well, you could do that too. Just mention Addressing Gettysburg at checkout, and they'll take 20% off the retail price of your item. So go to forthehistorian.com or stop by 42 York Street, or you can call them at 717-685-5207. That's forthehistorian.com or 717-685-5207. The Gettysburg Museum of History, located right here in the center of Gettysburg, PA. Owner and curator Eric Dorr grew up here and has spent his life collecting and preserving history through artifacts ranging from the Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg, World War II, presidential items, pop culture, and more. His museum is free and open to visitors Wednesday through Sunday, 11 to 5 p.m., where you can stop by and immerse yourself in some of the most amazing artifacts that you would never believe exist in the middle of Gettysburg. If you're a fan of Band of Brothers and Everything Easy Company, you'll love his exhibit featuring the Dick Winters collection and artifacts from D-Day. You can even own your own piece of history by buying one of the many relics they have for sale in the museum and on the website GettysburgMuseumofHistory.com. The Gettysburg Museum of History is a non-profit 501c3 organization with a foundation that allows all purchases and donations to keep the museum operating and open free of charge. They have been featured on the History Channel, the Travel Channel, the Smithsonian Channel, and the Science Channel. Now you can check them out on American Artifact, the series on the YouTube channel, The History Underground. So that's the Gettysburg Museum of History at 219 Baltimore Street or the GettysburgMuseumofHistory.com.
Ah, yes.
Oh, jeez.
Ladies and gentlemen, Addressing Gettysburg and Bantam Roasters are excited to present a brand new offering to the AG Getty's Nerd trademark community. If you're a coffee lover, or you know one, pick up a bag. A bag of what, you say? A bag of Little Ground Top, and pick it up today. I want to tell you how delicious it is.
How delicious is it, Matt?
Oh, I'm sorry. I turned your mic off because you were talking.
How delicious is it, Matt?
Oh, Bethany, it's so delicious. You want to know how delicious?
I do.
Well, tell me what your brain conjures up for deliciousness when I say this. It's expertly roasted by the amazing team at Bantam Roasters in Gettysburg. Does that give you an idea yet?
It does.
Well, I'll give you more of an idea.
Okay.
This blend features notes of cacao, wildflowers, and toasted sugar.
Toasted sugar.
And if you've got an exquisitely sophisticated palate like I do, you'll also detect notes of black pepper, curry, cayenne, honey, and whatever else I forgot to wash off my spoon before I stirred it. It's available in the whole bean or in the ground. Not in the ground, meaning the below our feet, but you can get it ground, and then they'll say to you, how do you prepare it? In a drip or in a Francais press? And you tell them, and they ground it accordingly, because apparently there's a difference. I didn't know that, but they know that. You know why they know that? Because they're Bantam Roasters. And that's their job. They're the experts. I'm not the coffee expert. That's not my job. It's their job to be the coffee experts, and they do it well. So go to addressinggettysburg.com/cafe to order your bags today. Or, you know what you could do when you come to town? You stop in at Bantam Roasters over at 82 Steinware Avenue. So that's either addressinggettysburg.com/cafe or Bantam Roasters. By the way, they sold out this week.
Again?
And, yeah, this weekend.
Wow, that's awesome.
And that is awesome. We've been doing really well with it. Now, when I say they sold out, I mean they sold out on the shelves. You can always order it online. Mm-hmm. They fulfill the orders every Friday. They bag them every Friday, and I believe they ship them every Friday too. So, you got to figure that way. But that's what you get when you go to addressinggettysburg.com/cafe, or you just walk into Bantam Roasters. The problem is, make sure you walk into Bantam Roasters on Friday night or Saturday, because by Sunday, they could all be gone. Hey, Jack. Hey, listen. They could all be gone, Jack. Gone. Folks, that's no lie. They could all be gone.
Oh my gosh.
Bantam Roasters, 82 Steinware Avenue. AddressingGettysburg.com/ as a guitarist. And we're back with Chris Brenneman. We are talking about the cyclorama. The cyclorama painting. Very exciting painting here at Gettysburg, and you can come and see it yourself. It is property of the U.S. government or of the foundation?
The U.S. government.
U.S. government. So you own it, ladies and gentlemen. Come and see it. Let's start with the questions. Of course, if you want to ask questions, you've got to be a patron. Most patrons can submit questions via email And the first lieutenants are the lucky ones, though, because they get to watch these live, and then they can call in if they want to, and we might have a caller or two today. So let's get to the first submitted questions here. Jamie Umstad says, when was Abraham Lincoln added to the painting? We'll start with that one. Just 3.
It seems to me like he was always there. I have old photographs that were taken before he jazzed it up, as I was telling you about.
Right.
And he was already in there before he jazzed it up. What's interesting, though, is when I look at some of the other versions, like the New York copy, the guy in that spot doesn't look like Lincoln. So I don't know. Maybe he snuck Lincoln into other places in other paintings.
Maybe he wasn't popular in New York. Did New York vote for him? Yeah, they did, didn't they?
Well, I don't know. New York might have been Democratic at the time.
I thought New Jersey was like the only state that went stupid.
I'm not sure. I don't know for sure.
I don't know. Maybe,
but there were a lot of Democrats in New York City. At least.
Yeah.
But I would think, I don't know. Maybe he put him in at different places. Maybe he put himself in at different places in different paintings.
Yeah, I would be in there like 14
I wish
times.
I could, ask the guy these questions. It'd be really cool. If I'd have been working at the cyclorama the day that he actually visited, I'd have had 50 questions for it.
Of course. All right. Jamie says, was there a signal station on Little Round Top on July 3rd? It seems like it would have been removed after the 2nd. I wish Jamie was calling in on this one because I would like to ask her, ¿por qué? ¿Por qué do you say that, Jamie? But go ahead.
Yeah, I looked it up in the ORs, and they were definitely still there on the 3rd day. And I don't see why you would move a signal station. It's such a great view.
Yeah.
There's not a better view to be found within miles,
I mean, who wants, the sunset is beautiful up there.
I would imagine on the 4th, they started moving it as they knew the armies were starting to get into motion. Also, it was probably raining so hard on the 4th that you couldn't see anything from up there.
Right. What's the point?
Yeah.
And then she says, what other signal stations are visible in the cyclorama? Are there other ones?
There are. There's a small signal station on Cemetery Hill.
Of course.
Because you got to be able to send the message to somewhere.
Yeah.
And Cemetery Hill, from that spot, they could quickly get to Meade's headquarters and give him the information. Now, in real life, there was also one on Powers Hill, but you can't see anything in the cyclorama.
Now, you said something interesting about the signal flags before. What was that?
They're not the right kind of signal flags. It's a tall pole with different colored flags on it. That's like what the Navy would have used. Where different colored flags and different patterns signify different messages. The Army would have had a flag that they wagged back and forth, almost like what the lifeguards use.
Yeah.
And someone with binoculars or a telescope would have watched them, translated it, and then flagged a message back to them. So he has the wrong kind of signal station, but he has it in the right location. So I think when he went to the War Department, they just showed him the wrong kind of flags. But the thing that's interesting is it was so dirty and beat up, you couldn't see either of those signal stations very easily at the old building, but they look great now.
Now you can see them. Gerald Madden, he says, my understanding is Lincoln is in the painting. Where is Lincoln? Well, we pointed that out before. And he says, one has a man looking like Lincoln being carried by 2 soldiers, and there is a second man who looks like Lincoln not far from the first, lying on the ground next to a haystack. Maybe it was the Lincoln twins that he was trying to do there.
Well, yeah, the guy near the haystack was the one near Dr. Studi that we just pulled up, and then the other guy was the one with the sort of reddish hair.
Right.
So I don't think either one of those guys is Lincoln.
Yeah.
I mean, they have beards. There's some similarities, but not nearly. The one that is him really looks like him.
There's, when you look at the one that Philippa Toe said is Lincoln, right? You can see it's Lincoln. The other guys look like Lincoln, which is, to me, the distinction. Like, you resemble Lincoln because you have a beard, maybe you have a long face, you're skinny, whatever the case. But this guy is Lincoln. You look at it and you go, that's Lincoln. I don't need to be told that's Lincoln's face.
Well, he also does look like tall and thin.
Yeah.
I think the other guys maybe just look normal.
Right.
They
look like normal guys.
He looks like a tall, thin guy. So yeah.
How many paintings are still around, and can you see them today? So you said there's pieces of other ones.
There's a couple pieces of the New York copy have still survived.
And where are they again?
2 are in the park's collection
here
at Gettysburg.
Okay. Do you ever take them out?
One is privately owned. They haven't been out in a while. They used to be on display in the old building, in the old cyclorama.
Okay.
And there's pictures of them in our book here.
How, because these aren't Xerox copies. These are I'm doing it over again copies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how, and was it the same dozen guys working on?
Well, he did the first two in Europe.
Okay.
And he was getting charged such large like import fees and tariffs and stuff. He set up a studio in New York City and did the third and fourth copy in the United States.
Okay.
So I think he may have had some different assistants on the third and fourth one.
So then are those copies, are there any differences? Because, like, I mean, even though it's paint by numbers essentially, or coloring book type of a thing, it's still other people doing it. So
Yes.
everybody is unique in their own way, even when they're all like, filling in the blanks.
Right. They're all very similar.
Yeah.
But if you put the same section of each painting side by side, you can find minor differences between the two. Yeah, the different assistants had slightly different techniques and stuff. He did make some ongoing changes too, that he was slightly modifying it from one version to another.
Okay.
We talked about General Armistead. In the first two copies, he's on a horse. People told him that was wrong. In the third and fourth one, he puts him on foot. So he found out that was a mistake. He fixes it.
Okay.
He added General Meade in the New York copy, and then he adds him to the Boston copy when they spruce up the Boston copy. He adds more flags. In his initial thing, everybody just had a U.S. flag. But then he started adding the state flag next to the U.S. flag.
Okay.
So he was, I think that's pretty cool that an artist is willing to change his art for realism.
Sure.
It's like a documentary.
Yeah.
Now he asked about how many are still around. All four of Philippetto's Gettysburgs, besides those pieces, are accounted for. The Philadelphia and Chicago one were destroyed, but other artists ripped him off, and there could have been as many as 10 imitation Gettysburg cycloramas that were done by other artists that circulated around the country for a while. And one of those has survived and is in storage. It used to be at Wake Forest University.
Yeah.
Some guys bought it and they thought they were going to sell it, but they couldn't. So they gave it to a North Carolina. It's the Museum of the Civil War and Reconstruction. I think it's in Raleigh, North Carolina. So they have this imitation Battle of Gettysburg cyclorama that looks pretty good in storage. The problem is you would need millions and millions of dollars to restore it, and you need a huge building to hold it.
Sure.
So I don't think they know what they're going to do with it. There's some talk about maybe just putting up a piece of it so people can see it.
I would love to see
Which would be really cool.
And that's one of the knockoffs.
Yes.
So how would they have done that back then?
Well, you go to see it, and they sold souvenir photographs of it. Slides. So you could buy the slides.
God.
Some of the rip-off ones look pretty bad.
I bet.
This particular one looks really good. And we think that one of Philippetto's assistants might have left, gone to another studio, and did it. He may have even taken some of the sketches and grids with him, because the sketches and grids haven't survived. So maybe one of the assistants took it with him, and that's why his copy is so good.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Kevin Widener says, was it common for 19th century artists to paint historical figures themselves or other non-combatants into their work, or was this a marketing ploy used by Philippetto? That's a good question.
Well, we talked about it before that they would do this.
Yeah.
They would try to sneak themselves in there.
Yeah. So not a marketing ploy.
No, it was
Because who wants
a
to go
common
see
tactic.
Philippetto, right?
Right.
It's like, oh, let's go see the Gettysburg Cyclorama. Philippetto is in it.
And I mean, I think there's even examples of guys doing this back in Greek and Roman times,
Sure,
where they snuck themselves in there.
Well, yeah, because did he didn't sign the cyclorama, did he?
No, because that would have
Did
been
the
like
Greeks
taking
or
credit for
Romans?
the whole thing.
Right.
No.
No, exactly. So you got to put your mark on it somehow.
Right.
So there you go.
Well, the other interesting thing that artists have told me, I'm not an artist myself, but they said it's really hard to make up an imaginary face.
It is.
It's much easier to just copy somebody else's face and put it in there. So that's probably what they did. They used the assistants. They used the models that they had posing in uniform and stuff, because when you make up a fake face, it's easy to. It doesn't look right.
That's why AI isn't really that good yet. Like when you do it, it's like that. There's something weird about that guy's face.
Yeah.
And then according to your book, there is one dog depicted in the painting. Did any of the units engaged have a dog as a mascot? And has it ever been proven that it was the artist's dog? So we kind of touched on this before.
Yeah, I can't prove it was the artist's dog unless we find a diary or something. But I think it's Sally the dog from the 11th Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
If he heard that story, it would make sense because it really does. It's the same kind of, color and size of dog and everything. For those of you that haven't seen the monument, the little dog curl, it kind of looks like a pit bull.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be brown and black in color, just like the one in the painting.
I think Sadie is the name I've heard for the dog over on Culp's Hill.
Was it? Okay.
I think so. For some reason, that name has been bouncing around in my empty head. Mike, you're on the air with a question for Chris Brenneman, licensed battlefield guide.
Yeah, I think it's Gracie, isn't it?
Gracie,
the dog?
Gracie. I knew it was an A something. Gracie was the name.
Gracie.
Thank you, Mike. You think you know.
well, well, thank you, Chris, and I really do appreciate this, and I really do appreciate the book. It's fantastic, so thank you. Also, one comment about the painting itself. I've seen the painting many times, and there are still new details I'm still finding whenever I go visit. Okay, recently I saw I kind of geeked out at the burning remnants of the Bliss farm that you can see. I mean, that's pretty impressive considering he's going off of photographs, and the Bliss farm would not have been there, but yet he includes that in there.
Was I with you, Mike?
Yes, someone must have told him this story.
Was I with you when you were geeking out on that?
Yeah, you were there. You were there with me when I was geeking out about that.
I feel like that.
Because
I was witnessing that. Yeah.
Yeah, that is really cool that he realistically shows the Bliss barn as a burning pile of rubble because it would have been set on fire earlier that day. So either when he took the tour, local guide William Holdsworth was one of the first battlefield guides, took him on a tour. Maybe he told him that story, and that's how he knew to put that in there. There are a couple things, though, that they must have forgot to tell him because there's a few buildings that were built after the war that made it into the painting. Because if they're in his picture, they make it into the painting.
Sure.
For example, the Sherfy barn is in the painting intact. It should be on fire because it caught fire during the bombardment.
Yeah.
But they had rebuilt it by the time Philippeteau took his pictures, so he shows it intact.
And the Kodori barn and farmhouse are not what we see today.
There's a big butcher shop across the street that was built after the war, but it's in the painting because it was in his picture.
Because it was in the pictures, yeah. Now, I know the barn burnt down, the Kodori barn at some point. Did it burn down before or after the photographs were done?
I think after.
Okay. So that's the Civil War barn that we see depicted.
Yeah, it doesn't have the white steeples.
Right.
It's not as big as the modern one.
Right. And then the house, too, I don't remember, again, if it's pre or post this photograph, but the house itself isn't as deep off of the street as it is today. They built that on. It was basically just a square farmhouse during the battle.
They did build an extension onto it that I'm pretty sure is in the painting.
So it's a post-battle edition, but pre-Philippeteau's painting or photographs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're in his photos. There's the John's Farm, which is behind Friendly's, is in the painting, but it wasn't there during the battle. It was like 1872. The trees that decorate the Evergreen Cemetery.
That was another one.
Are in the painting, but they would have been planted after the battle.
The line of evergreens you're talking about.
Yeah, that lines the cemetery, the Soldiers National Cemetery. But they were here when he took his pictures, so they make it into the painting.
You know, some rebellious artists should do a really nice copy of the part of the painting that shows where the Colt Park is and, Pickett's Buffet and all that stuff, but paint them in. So paint like part of the battle scene, and in the background see the Golden Arches and KFC and the neighborhoods as just a commentary on how shitty we are as a people.
Well, my favorite is I've been asked, why didn't they do a cyclorama of day 1 and day 2? Or why don't you animate it? And my response is, yeah, let's do all those things. But do you have the money?
Right.
It's
always money.
If you can finance that stuff, go to town. You know, that'd be awesome.
No, just do it, man. Just why don't you do it? You're the government. Just do it.
You know, you could put a platform up on Oak Hill and make a day 1 cyclorama.
That would be really cool, though. I mean, it's already there.
Ooh.
You got the platform on the tower.
Yeah.
Right? I know it's more than 15 feet, but so what? Screw with it, you know? And then you can make another cyclorama. Problem is, though, if you could get the money to do it, some eccentric rich person might say, I'll give you the money to do that. But then who's going to pay the money to go see it? Nobody cares.
Who's going to paint it, too? How many guys are still around that have the skill?
Paint it. Oh, the skill? No. Well, no. That's not true. There would be people that would love to get paid to paint that. But the question is, who is going to then go and, you know, recoup the cost of making it?
Right.
And, you know, I mean, pay to see it to recoup the cost of it. I don't think the public is that curious. I think like a lot of new things, you know, that we see here, the first year, it's like, ooh, look at the shiny new thing. But then after a while, it's like, all right, you know, I've been there, seen that. What else are we going to do? All right, Mike, thank you very much for the call.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good day, Michael. All right, and looks like we've got Eric on the line, and he's calling from Atlanta. Or maybe he wants to talk about the Atlanta one. Well, I don't know. Let's let him tell us. Eric, you're on the air.
Well, good afternoon. I guess we are afternoon now.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So,
we are.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my call. And thank you, Chris, for the show today and the talk. I just bought, oddly enough, the book a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it looks great. You and Sue did an excellent job with it, so I'm really looking forward to reading it.
Thank you.
But you're welcome. What I wanted to ask was, certainly, and I'm not sure what your knowledge is on it, and I just kind of learned about it myself, and I travel to Atlanta a lot. And certainly it's about a different subject matter than the Gettysburg Cyclorama. But, what are the comparisons between the Gettysburg Cyclorama and the Atlanta Cyclorama, between the histories of them, the methods that they were used or shown? Do you have much information on that?
Yeah, a little bit. It's the same time period. Gettysburg was the first one to come to the United States. And it was such a big hit that it started a whole cyclorama craze. You know, not only was Phil Bateau doing 4 Gettysburgs, there could have been as many as 10 rip-off ones. And then some German artists came over and set up a studio in Milwaukee and started painting other battle scenes. And they did the Battle of Atlanta. They did Second Manassas, Shiloh, Missionary Ridge.
I would love to see
So they did a
those.
whole bunch of them. I believe it was 1885 and 1886. They did 2 Atlantas. And one of those eventually made it to Atlanta, found a permanent home, and that's why it survived. And it's the only other cyclorama that's still on display in the United States. It's almost the same size. I think it's ours is 377 by 42. Theirs is, I think, 359 by 46.
Okay. A little taller.
Technically, it's taller, but not quite as long. It might have a couple more square feet than we do, but it has a little more sky.
Right.
But they all had to be about the same size because they made pre-made buildings to hold these paintings. And then that way they could move them from city to city. And it would fit in this pre-made building. And they used to say that they were 50 by 400.
Okay.
But that's just because that's much easier to say than 377 by 42.
Yeah.
Plus, there was probably a little extra canvas that hung over the top and bottom that was nailed onto that to hold it in place.
Well, and most people can't picture 400 feet or 350 feet. So what's the difference? You know, just say 400.
Yeah, make it
I don't know
even.
what that looks like.
But it was a team of German artists. The main guy's name was Heine that painted that one. And, it's very similar in style, in presentation. I think there's a little bit of difference between theirs because the diorama doesn't come up to the platform. There's a bit of a space between the viewing platform and the diorama, but their diorama has people on it.
Yeah.
Mannequins and stuff. But the mannequins are only maybe about 3 feet high. So it makes up for the fact that I think in Atlanta, he had to build a taller observation platform because it's very hilly terrain and he had to be higher up so he could see more of the battlefield.
Of course.
At Gettysburg, because you're already on a ridge,
Right.
he's going to be 15 feet high because that's the exact same height as the viewing platform. He doesn't have to fudge it. But the guy that did the Atlanta one must have had to figure out the difference.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you talk about complicated, now I'm really lost.
Yeah, see, that's the thing is I don't equate artists with a keen mathematical mind.
Yeah.
That's because math kiss my ass. But
Now, some interesting things. They had the cast from Gone with the Wind see the cyclorama in Atlanta after they made the movie. And when they asked Clark Gable what he thought about it, he said, the only thing that would make it better is if I was in it. So they made one of the mannequins look like Clark Gable now. The artist that did its name was Heine, and apparently he did keep a journal, and it's like written really, really tiny in like an old German dialect. And they have a guy that's going through and translating it, but it's like a really slow, painstaking process.
Sure.
But I think he's going to be able to find out some of these secrets about their painting that I wish I could find out about our painting. Heine apparently went to see the Gettysburg Cyclorama, and he said something like it was okay. And this guy says that means it was pretty good because this guy wouldn't admit somebody else is better than he is.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know people like that.
He grudgingly says it's okay, and that guy says that means he thought it was pretty good.
Yeah. Eric, anything else?
Yeah, I do have one other question, and it might be a part of it, a part of the painting, and getting back to the Gettysburg cyclorama. So again, maybe something you've already touched on, but if you had to pick your most favorite part of the painting, what would it be?
Oh boy, that's tough. My favorite part of the painting. I mean, just in general, I just love the sense of motion in the painting. All the people look like they're moving. The horses look like they're moving. There's a horse running to the rear, like near the exploding limber chest in the middle of the high water mark.
Yeah.
And you can almost see the fear in the horse's eyes. Like
Yes.
it really looks realistic. And yeah, I mean, just in general, the motion of the painting is maybe my favorite part. There's so many cool little scenes. I mean, General Hancock looks great.
Yep.
The death of Alonzo Cushing is a well done scene. Oh boy,
There's a lot of good
those
stuff
might
in
be
there.
my two favorites.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much in that. It's hard to. I love the. You know what I love is just the mountains.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Like it looks exactly. I mean, they didn't go, well, nobody's going to notice. Like they did it almost exact. I mean, I can almost imagine the radio towers on the mountain near Camp David. And I can
Painting
imagine
ski
the
liberty.
ski slopes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's and
Exactly.
it really all the hay. What else are you gonna do with it?
Right.
You know, and by stacking it up in those haystacks, the top would get kind of matted down, and then the water would just sort of run off of it. Once the top got kind of
Okay,
waterlogged.
that's why they did it that way. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and then the because they look like giant mushrooms. So
Yeah.
and is that because people would cut or pull pieces of hay off, or animals would come and eat the hay?
Farmers told me animals would eat the hay or straw, and from head height down.
Yeah.
You can also see there is an area where they're cutting some of the hay off for bedding.
Right.
And they're making stacks of hay next to one of the haystacks.
Right. Man, could you imagine if you had allergies back then? They didn't have Flonase. Yeah. And you were sleeping on hay and you're just like out in these fields all the time. I would have given our position away from the sneezing.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows? That must have been tough.
Yeah. Miserable. Eric, anything else?
Nope, I think that's good. Thank you, guys. Great show.
Thank you for the call, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, listen, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank Chris for coming on the show. So I'm going to do that right now. Chris, thank you for coming on the show. I really enjoyed this. I love talking about the cyclorama.
Well, thank you.
I find it so fascinating. I could have you. This is our second cyclorama show. We did one with Sue. Now we do one with you. So we got both of the authors of the book, and I can go on and would do it 100 more times if you want to. I love talking about this. It's so fascinating, and I really do recommend, ladies and gentlemen, that next time you come to Gettysburg, if there's an evening with the painting going on, do it. If not, you're not going to be disappointed if you do the regular, what is it? It's not hourly. It's, what is it?
Most of the time, it's every 15
minutes. If you do the regular every 15-minute showing, you're still going to be in awe of this thing. It is really fascinating. And with the sound and the music and the lights, it gives me the chills every time I go in there. It's beautiful. So I think you'll like it. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you to our patrons for sending in questions and calling in. And thank you all for listening. I think I already said that, but I'll say it again because I really appreciate it. So you have a good night or day or whenever. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Whether you're a history enthusiast, reenactor, or someone seeking a unique piece of the past, the Badge Maker has something for everyone and anyone. Don't miss out on owning a piece of history. Shop now at CivilWarCoreBadges.com and elevate your connection to the Civil War era. That's CivilWarCoreBadges.com. Thanks for listening.
Our hearts so stout have got us fame, for soon 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man for debt shall go to jail from Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man for debt shall go to jail from Gary Owen.